It was supposed to be just another family dinner. The kind where everyone gathers around the table, plates full of food, casual chatter echoing through the house. My wife had cooked her signature roast chicken, the kids were scrolling on their phones, and my mother-in-law was already halfway through her second glass of wine. I remember feeling tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from work, but from something deeper. From pretending everything is fine when it's not. From swallowing words just to keep the peace. That night, I had invited someone to join us. Someone my wife didn't know very well, but who had quietly become a part of my everyday life, the janitor at my office building. His name was Carl. A man in his 60s. Wrinkles around his eyes that spoke of hardship. A gentle voice. Always early, always polite. Always overlooked. I thought it would be a kind gesture, to invite him to dinner. He had no family nearby, and I knew he usually spent holidays and weekends alone. But as soon as my wife saw him standing in the hallway, holding a small bottle of wine he clearly couldn't afford, everything changed. She smiled politely, but her eyes narrowed. And when dinner was served, she leaned close to me and whispered words I will never forget. "He's just a janitor. Let him eat later." At that moment, something cracked inside me. I didn't respond. I didn't make a scene. But I knew what I had to do. And that night, I made a decision that would unravel everything we thought we knew, about respect, about dignity, and about who really deserves a seat at our table. Carl had been working in our office building for over 15 years. He never spoke much. Just a nod in the hallway, a quiet good morning as he pushed his cart down the corridor. Most people barely noticed him. To them, he was just part of the scenery, like the vending machine or the elevator music. Necessary, but invisible. But I noticed him. Maybe it was the way he always remembered everyone's names, even when they didn't remember his. Or how he made sure the floor near the receptionist's desk was extra clean every morning before she arrived, not because anyone asked him to, but because he knew she wore heels and didn't want her to slip. Sometimes I'd stay late, working after hours. That's when I really got to see him, not just the man in the blue uniform, but the man beneath it. We'd share coffee from the break room. Talk about little things. Weather. Baseball. Old records. Life. One night, I found him replacing the light bulbs in the stairwell, a task far beyond his job description. I asked him why he was doing it. He shrugged and said, "I saw it flickering yesterday. Someone could trip. Just thought I'd take care of it." That was Carl. He didn't just clean floors. He watched out for people. Quietly. Without asking for praise. Without expecting anything in return. And in a world so loud with ego and status, Carl's silence spoke volumes. That's why I invited him to dinner. Not out of pity. But out of respect. He deserved to be seen. But my wife. She didn't see him at all. I still remember the first day I saw Carl. It was my second week at the company. I was late, juggling coffee, papers, and a phone call while trying to figure out which conference room I was supposed to be in. I rushed into the lobby and slipped on a patch of wet floor, nearly crashing to the ground. Before I could hit the tile, a hand caught my arm. It was Carl. His grip was firm but gentle. He helped me regain my balance, then pointed to the yellow sign I had completely missed, "Caution, wet floor." "Careful there," he said with a small smile. "These shoes weren't made for skating." I laughed, embarrassed, and muttered a thank you. I don't even think I asked his name. I just kept walking. But something about that moment stuck with me. He wasn't annoyed. He wasn't impatient. He had this calm, steady presence, like someone who had seen enough of life to know that rushing never really gets you anywhere worth going. Over time, I saw him more and more. Always doing something that didn't quite fit his job. Helping carry boxes. Replacing a flickering bulb. Fixing the vending machine when it jammed. People called him the janitor, but honestly, he was more reliable than our maintenance crew, and kinder than most of our managers. Still, no one really knew his story. Where he came from. Why he was still working at his age. Whether he had a family. No one asked. But that first encounter, that quiet act of kindness, it stayed with me. And it was the beginning of something I didn't even realize at the time, the slow, steady build-up of a truth that would eventually break open right in the middle of my own family's dinner table. There's a certain kind of pride that doesn't come from wealth or recognition. It comes from showing up, day after day, and doing the job no one else wants to do, without complaint, without applause. Carl carried that kind of pride in every step he took. He wore the same uniform every day, navy blue, name patch slightly faded, sleeves always rolled up. It was always clean, always pressed. Like he was honoring the work, no matter how others saw it. I once asked him why he never took time off. He said, "Work keeps my hands full and my heart calm." I didn't push. But I knew there was more behind those words. Some evenings I'd see him standing outside the building, just watching the sunset over the parking lot. Not rushing home. Not checking his phone. Just standing there like a man who had learned to find peace in simple things. One Friday, I handed him a bonus gift card our department had been given to distribute, a thank you for building support staff. He accepted it slowly, then looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I appreciate this. But truth is, just being noticed means more. Being noticed. That's what most people crave deep down, not fame or money, just to be seen. To be acknowledged as human. To be treated with dignity." Carl never asked for it. He never demanded anything. But the dignity he carried within himself made it all the more painful to see him treated like he didn't matter. That's why my wife's words, "He's just a janitor," didn't land lightly. They hit something sacred. Something I had come to understand in the quiet spaces of ordinary life. Because Carl represented more than a role. He represented every person we pass by without a second thought. Every person who keeps the world turning while others take the credit. And in that moment, I realized. I wasn't just defending Carl. I was defending every invisible soul who ever picked up what someone else threw away, and still walked with their head held high. My wife, Danielle, is a woman of structure. She believes in appearances, polished silverware, folded napkins, polite conversation. She was raised in a family that valued image over intimacy, achievement over character. To her, success was measured by titles and tax brackets, not by humility or heart. So when she saw Carl standing in our entryway, holding that cheap bottle of red wine in both hands like it was something precious, I knew what she was thinking before she even said a word. She smiled, yes. But it was the kind of smile people use when they're entertaining someone they don't really want in their home. She offered to take his coat, but didn't look him in the eyes. She introduced him to the family, but not by name. "This is the janitor from my husband's office." And when Carl extended the wine toward her, she hesitated. Just for a second. But I saw it. That flicker of judgment. That unspoken question, "What is he doing here?" To Danielle, our dinner table was a space reserved for people of a certain status, professionals, neighbors, family friends who could help our kids get into better schools or offer vacation tips in Tuscany. Carl didn't fit. And instead of asking why he had come, or how I had come to know him, she pulled me aside while the rest of the family settled into conversation. That's when she said it, softly, sharply. "He's just a janitor. Let him eat later." It wasn't anger in her voice. It was dismissal. Like he was an afterthought. An extra. Someone who belonged behind the scenes, not seated beside us. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because in that moment, I saw something in my wife I hadn't noticed before, or maybe something I'd chosen to ignore. It wasn't that she was cruel. It was that she had been raised in a world where some people simply didn't count. Where kindness had limits, and respect had prerequisites. And suddenly, I knew this night wasn't going to end the way she had planned. We all sat around the table, plates full, the room filled with the soft clatter of forks and casual laughter. My daughter was talking about college applications, my son complained about the Wi-Fi, and my mother-in-law was giving Carl the kind of side glance that said everything without saying a word. Carl didn't speak much. He smiled. Nodded. Thanked my wife for the meal. He placed his cloth napkin on his lap and waited politely for others to begin before taking a bite. His hands trembled slightly, maybe from nerves, maybe from age, but his posture remained straight, dignified. That's when it happened. Danielle stood up to refill drinks. She moved around the table, offering wine to her mother, then to me, then to the kids. When she reached Carl, she didn't pour. Instead, she looked down and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm sure you're used to eating after everyone else. You don't mind waiting for seconds, do you?" The room fell silent. Even the kids stopped chewing. Carl looked up at her, not angry, not embarrassed, just quiet. A kind of stillness that filled the room like a heavy fog. He didn't respond. He simply placed his fork down beside his plate and folded his hands. I wanted to speak. I wanted to jump to his defense. But the words caught in my throat. I looked around the table, and all I saw were faces pretending not to notice what had just happened. Smiles frozen in place. Eyes darting anywhere but toward him. It was a moment of raw, uncomfortable truth, the kind that strips away every layer of politeness and shows you exactly who you are. And who you've been pretending to be. Carl didn't get up. He didn't walk out. He stayed seated, because he knew, probably better than anyone at that table, That walking away from disrespect doesn't always make a point. Sometimes, you have to let the silence speak for itself. Carl didn't say a word. He just sat there, his hands folded neatly in his lap, eyes lowered but not ashamed, never ashamed. There was a quiet dignity in the way he handled it, as if he had lived this moment 100 times before. Maybe he had. I watched him, feeling something I hadn't expected, shame. Not at my wife's words, but at my silence. Because I didn't stand up for him. I didn't say, that was uncalled for, or he deserves better. I just sat there, letting the moment pass like it was weather, like it would blow over if we all pretended it didn't happen. But it didn't blow over. It settled in the room like dust, thick, suffocating, undeniable. Carl glanced up at me once. Just once. And that look said everything. Not blame. Not disappointment. Just understanding. A quiet confirmation that he expected this. That he had stopped being surprised by the cruelty of polite people a long time ago. He didn't finish his plate. He excused himself with a soft thank you for having me, and walked to the front door, still carrying the same wine bottle he had brought, unopened, untouched. And I let him go. The door closed behind him with a soft click that felt louder than any argument. I looked around the table and realized, no one else was going to speak about it. To them, the moment was over. A footnote. A social hiccup. But to me, it was a fracture. A small break in the foundation of something I thought was solid, my marriage, my values, my role in this family. And in that silence, I made a decision. I would not let this be the end of Carl's story in our home. That night, after the dishes were cleared and the kids had gone to their rooms, I sat across from Danielle in the living room. She looked tired, not physically, but emotionally, like someone who had been carrying a weight for so long she no longer noticed it. I asked her, gently, why did you say that to him? At first, she deflected. I didn't mean anything by it. He's used to that kind of work, I just thought. I cut her off. That's not an explanation. That's avoidance. She sighed. Long and heavy. Then she looked away, eyes fixed on the fireplace like it might offer a better answer than she could. And then she said something I didn't expect. When I was growing up, my father worked 2 jobs, and one of them was cleaning offices at night. He'd come home with his hands cracked from the chemicals, his clothes smelling like bleach. My mother hated it. She made him shower in the garage before he could come inside. She said it made us look poor. She paused. I used to wait by the door to hug him, but he wouldn't let me. Said I'd ruin my pajamas. Danielle's voice trembled for the first time that evening. I was embarrassed. Not of him, but of how people treated him. Like he didn't matter. Like he was dirt under their shoes. I hated that feeling, of being invisible, of being judged. So I promised myself I would never live like that again. Suddenly, her cruelty at the dinner table made more sense, not as malice, but as fear. A desperate, misguided attempt to distance herself from a past she never truly made peace with. But in doing so, she became part of the very system that had once humiliated her father. I sat in silence for a moment, letting the truth settle between us. Then I said, Carl reminded you of him, didn't he? She nodded. Slowly. Yes. And it scared me. It was the most human thing I'd heard her say in weeks. But understanding her didn't make what happened okay. If anything, it made the next part even more important. Because I wasn't going to let her fear silence the truth any longer. That night, after Danielle went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark with my laptop open, scrolling through the building's security footage, not out of spite, but because I needed to remind myself of what I already knew. I needed to see Carl. As he really was. Not the man my wife reduced him to in a single sentence, but the man I had come to respect in quiet, ordinary moments. And there he was, on screen, timestamp after timestamp, unlocking the building before sunrise, cleaning up coffee spills no one reported, fixing a broken chair in the conference room, picking up a fallen box for a receptionist who never even looked up to say thank you. Then I found the clip that stayed with me. Carl, in the lobby, bending down to tie the shoelaces of an elderly delivery driver who couldn't reach his feet. No audience. No recognition. Just pure, unfiltered kindness. That was the moment I knew I had to do something. Not to humiliate Danielle. Not to start a fight. But to hold up a mirror, to show my family the man they had failed to see. The next morning, I emailed the clips to our home smart TV. And that night, as we all sat down for dinner again, I did something no one expected. I picked up the remote. And I pressed play. The room was quiet as the footage began to play. At first, no one understood what they were watching. My daughter glanced at me, confused. My son leaned back in his chair. Danielle froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. The screen showed Carl entering the building in the early morning hours. Alone. Head down. Steady. The lobby lights flickered to life as he walked through, pushing his cart with the quiet rhythm of someone who didn't need supervision to do the right thing. Then came the small moments, the ones most people overlook. Carl picking up a used coffee cup from the elevator floor and throwing it away. Carl helping a maintenance worker lift a ladder. Carl kneeling down to fix a crooked floor tile with tools from his own bag. My daughter whispered, "Wait. He did all that?" I didn't say a word. I let the video speak. Then came the clip that broke the silence completely, the one I'd found the night before. The elderly delivery man, struggling with his shoelaces. Carl setting down his mop, kneeling carefully, and tying them with gentle, practiced hands. Not for praise. Not for recognition. Just because it was the kind thing to do. Danielle stared at the screen, her eyes wet now. Not crying, not yet. But quiet. Still. Like someone who had just seen a ghost from their past and couldn't look away. When the video ended, I turned off the TV. No dramatic speech. No accusation. I just looked at my family and said, "That's the man we had dinner with last night? That's the man you dismissed?" For a moment, no one moved. Then, softly, my son said, "He seems like a good person." Danielle didn't speak. But her silence this time was different. Not defensive. Not cold. It was the silence of someone who had finally seen. After the screen went dark, the room didn't return to normal. There was no idle chatter. No clinking of silverware. Just a heavy, thoughtful stillness, like everyone was slowly processing what they had just witnessed. My mother-in-law was the first to react. She cleared her throat and reached for her wine glass, but her hand trembled. She didn't say anything, didn't need to. Her usual smirk was gone. Replaced by something almost unfamiliar on her face, humility. My daughter stared at her plate, biting her lip. "I didn't even talk to him," she said softly. "He asked me how school was going. And I just nodded." My son, always quick with sarcasm, stayed quiet. His eyes were fixed on the table, as if trying to make sense of the idea that someone in a janitor's uniform could be admirable. Maybe even heroic. Then Danielle finally spoke. Her voice was low, almost fragile. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't know he was like that." I looked at her and replied, gently, "You didn't want to know." She closed her eyes for a moment. Not in defiance, but in surrender. To her own guilt. To the realization that she had acted out of fear and pride, not out of truth. What unfolded next wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. The walls between us, walls built from assumptions, class, ego, began to shift. To crack. That dinner became something more than a meal. It became a reckoning. A mirror held up to our values, our upbringing, our blind spots. No one apologized out loud that night. But in the stillness, in the way each of us sat with what we'd seen, there was a quiet kind of repentance. And though Carl wasn't there to witness it, his presence filled every corner of that room, more powerful in absence than most people are in person. A few days after the dinner, I saw Carl again. He was back at work, as if nothing had happened. Same uniform. Same pace. Same quiet smile when he saw me. I asked if he had a few minutes to talk. He nodded and led me to the staff break room, a cramped space with a humming refrigerator and a dusty bulletin board. He poured us both a cup of weak coffee and sat down like he had all the time in the world. I told him I had shown the footage to my family. That I wanted them to understand who he really was. He didn't flinch. Didn't ask for details. Just listened, nodding slowly. Then, without me asking, he told me his story. He had once been a teacher. History, mostly. Middle school. For over 20 years. He loved it, especially working with kids who didn't fit the mold. Kids from broken homes. Kids who didn't believe in themselves. Kids who reminded him of himself. Then his wife got sick. Cancer. The bills piled up fast. Insurance didn't cover enough. He sold their house, cashed out his savings, and quit teaching to care for her full-time. For 2 years, he was by her side, every treatment, every hospital stay, every late-night scare. When she passed, he was left with almost nothing. No job. No retirement. Just grief and an apartment he could barely afford. So he took the first job he could get, janitorial work. "It's honest work," he said. "I may not be in a classroom anymore, but I still look out for people. Still try to leave things better than I found them." I sat there in silence, stunned. Everything I thought I knew about Carl deepened into something almost sacred. This man who mopped our floors had once inspired young minds. Had sacrificed everything for love. Had lived a life that most people, including my own wife, would never have guessed. He never bragged. Never corrected anyone who called him just a janitor. Because he knew who he was. And that's what made him more powerful than any title could ever give. After Carl shared his story, there was a quiet pause between us. The kind of silence that feels earned, not awkward, not empty. Just full of mutual respect. Then he looked up at me and asked, "So, what did they think? Your family?" I hesitated. I told him the truth, that some were ashamed, some surprised, and one, in particular, deeply shaken. That I hadn't played the video to shame anyone, but to open their eyes. He nodded thoughtfully, then took a slow sip of his coffee. "I've had people look through me my whole life," he said. "You get used to it. But you never stop hoping. One day someone will really see you." I told him my wife had seen the footage. That it had left her speechless. He smiled, but it wasn't a triumphant smile. There was no ego in it. Just something softer. Sadder. "She's not the first," he said quietly. "Won't be the last. But if she saw me, even just for a moment, then that's enough." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "You didn't have to do that. Show them, I mean." "I did," I replied. "Because if I didn't, I would have been just as guilty." Carl nodded, then leaned back and looked around the break room. "Funny thing about floors," he said. "People only notice them when they're dirty. But it's the clean ones that keep you standing." I didn't know what to say to that. Because it was perfect. He stood, patted me on the shoulder, and went back to work. Just like that. No speech. No ceremony. Just a man doing what he always did, serving quietly, living with grace, never needing the spotlight. And as I watched him walk down the hall with his mop and his cart, I realized, the video didn't show my family who Carl was. It showed me who I needed to become. The days that followed weren't filled with dramatic apologies or grand gestures. Change came slowly, the kind that doesn't shout, but whispers. It came in quiet moments, in the soft undoing of habits formed over years. Danielle didn't say much about the video at first. But the next morning, she asked me how to contact Carl. She didn't want to call. She wrote him a letter instead. A handwritten note in neat cursive, folded carefully into an envelope she placed on the kitchen counter. I never read it, and she never told me exactly what she said. But I saw the way her hand trembled as she sealed it. Carl never mentioned the letter. But 2 days later, she left a new pair of work gloves on our porch. She said they were for someone who uses their hands more honestly than most. My daughter, the same one who barely acknowledged him, started volunteering at the local shelter. She didn't announce it. Just asked one night if I could drop her off on Saturdays. My son started holding the door for the janitor at his school. Small thing. But it meant something. As for me, I began noticing more. Not just Carl. But all the invisible people, the bus driver who waits an extra beat for the late passenger, the grocery clerk who bags eggs with care, the woman who empties the office trash cans with earbuds in and a look of quiet focus. I started seeing them. And more importantly, I started seeing who I'd been. A man who thought he respected everyone, but only when it was easy. Only when it didn't challenge the comfort of his home, or his marriage, or the illusion of status. Carl changed that. Not with anger. Not with arguments. But with presence. With the simple power of a life lived with integrity, no matter who's watching. And while my wife and I still have our differences, that dinner, and everything that followed, became a turning point. Not just for our family. But for our humanity. That night changed something in us. Not in a way that's always visible. Not in ways that would impress strangers or earn applause. But in the quiet, steady shift of how we see people, and how we see ourselves. Because here's the truth. It's easy to be kind when it's convenient. It's easy to respect people who look like us, speak like us, or hold the same degrees and job titles. But real character, the kind that defines us when no one is watching, shows up in how we treat the ones the world forgets. The janitors. The waiters. The delivery drivers. The custodians. The invisible ones who carry the weight of our comfort and ask for nothing in return. Carl never asked for a seat at the table. But he always deserved one. And I will never forget the lesson he taught our family. That humility is louder than pride. That dignity isn't worn, it's lived. And that the worth of a man is never defined by the work he does, but by the heart he brings to it. If this story moved you, even just a little, I ask you to do one simple thing. Treat the next invisible person you meet like they matter. Because they do. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, need to be heard, please give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like Carl's waiting to be shared, stories that remind us who we are, and who we're meant to be. Thank you for watching.